Welcome back to the Mature Male Podcast. I'm your host, Wes, a psychotherapist helping men mature through timeless wisdom and practical guidance. Today's guest is Harrison Ammon. Harrison is a writer and a men's group leader who has been on a fascinating journey of personal growth through men's work, moving from being a part of Neil Strauss's group to developing his own approach to leading men toward authentic connection and purpose. Harrison, welcome.
Thanks, Wes. Excited to be on the podcast today.
Yeah, excited to have you. So you have an interesting background being a part of Neil Strauss's men's group early on. Could you share a little bit about that experience and how it led you deeper into the men's work that you do today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it was 2018, I I was struggling to meet women. I'd gotten out of a relationship maybe a year prior, and I made a pretty big life mistake that I don't need to elaborate on here. But that kind of for the first time made me reevaluate my life and look at the things I was doing. And I felt a little bit of a hole in my life by not having a woman, and the fact that I was struggling to meet them. Something needed to change. So I came across Neil's group in, I think it was early 2019, and Neil Strauss is he brought pickup artistry to the mainstream through his book The Game. And, he has went on his own personal journey and has come to be quite mature at this point. I think some of the work he was doing in the pickup community was maybe um, questionable from a moral standpoint. But anyways, knowing that his background in that, I was like, oh, this is perfect. This is what I need right now. And so I got to the group, and literally none of what we talked about had anything to do with like pickup artistry. It was diving deeper into childhood wounds, childhood traumas, family structures, learning about the pressures that society has put on us to live a certain life. Yeah, so it was eye opening for me. I had no idea that there was all this work that was needed to be done to get to a better place mentally. I thought, learning these pickup routines, learning how to talk to women was just a simple course or class that you could take and figure it out. So there's a lot more to it. But yeah, that's kind of how I got into the group, and what opened my eyes to the journey of doing self development work, I suppose.
Yeah, that's interesting. So that difference in what you thought the group would be and what it actually was, don't want to give away Neil's secrets, but I'm curious why you felt like that or what you learned was the reason why he focused on all those things that apparently on the outside didn't connect, but obviously have a deeper correlation. Why start with those things instead of jump right to giving someone the answers and exercises?
Yeah. I think I do remember early on in that group, he said something like, the pickup routines can get you to maybe like the second or third date. But once you actually have to like create true connection with someone, you're going to be lost. Because at the root of needing or feeling the need to like to get attention from women or like have women be part of your life, there are some self-esteem issues rooted in that, and a lack of self-worth. And so that was the I think that's what Neil realized, that at some point in his journey. He's like, hey, I'm not good after the third date. These women don't really want to stay around. So if I really want to be able to create a true connection with a woman, there's more than I need to do here. So that's what I remember from that experience.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and I think something that most guys don't think about often. Many of us are so short-sighted and we say, well, if I can get her to sleep with me or go out with me, then I'm good.
Hmm.
But if you're successful enough to get into a relationship, you're stuck with you. And whatever you is what the relationship comprises of, for better, for worse. And I think that is an important thing to note for guys out there who are wanting to ask someone out, is to not just make it a short-term goal of asking someone out. Of course, that has to go well for anything else to be possible. But then what you're saying those framework is, which is set yourself up for long-term success by doing the work, having an effective first few goes to be able to get those dates, But then once you're locked into something, make it sustainable, make it a relationship where you don't have to end it because you're not ready. And there are many guys I work with where that's the case. It's just perpetually getting into these relationships where they find out halfway through, I'm not ready, I'm not good enough, I need more time. And there's no judgment. That's fair. Everyone's on their own path as far as that timeline and maturity. But I'm glad you named that because I think that's an important place to start.
Yeah, absolutely.
So speaking of going deeper, and we're talking about moving beyond the foundations of a first or second date into doing the deeper work to make sure a relationship is sustainable. It seems like this same process was true for you, and starting with Neil's group giving you so much valuable, necessary essentialism and foundation for growing in the ability to date and getting to a relationship. But it wasn't quite enough. So I'm curious what that transition was like for you, moving from being a part of those initial men's groups into some other work that may better suit the inner work you were trying to do.
The first men's group, I would say they laid a great foundation, as you mentioned, and I frankly don't think I was ready for it. Where I was at in my life, I was mid 20s, still very focused on finding or attracting, high quality women, and so that was what I extracted from the group, or tried to extract. And after getting into some relationships with people who were high quality people, but maybe not great matches for me, and kind of staying in those relationships for too long, and ending up breaking my own heart and the other person's heart, started to like unlocked another level of depth that I needed to take to get to a place of feeling confident with where my life was. So stepping into the men's group I'm a part of now, it's called Integrated Men. um, the focus there is building a life that you are happy about, with or without a woman involved. And the analogy that we use often in the group is the great cake of life. So building a great cake of life means your family, your friends, your support group, your passions, your job, these sorts of things. And the icing is the woman, is how we talk about it. So once you've cooked your great cake, then you are ready to put icing on top of it. Whereas I think a lot of men, and I can just speak for myself, before finding this group, what I thought I needed a woman to make me whole. And a lot of that was subconscious, I would say, until recently. But when I was single, it was always like, I need to find somebody to go on a date with. I need to have some sort of like relationship going on, or else I'm a loner. I'm, an incel or whatever it might be. But so that, yeah, I would say that's like the high level difference, at least for how I'm approaching this new men's group.
Yeah. And that integrated life program framework, as well as the cake analogy, is there a particular author or source that comes from that people can check out?
Yeah, so the group was originally created because of, or based on the No More Mr. Nice Guy book. It was written by Dr. Robert Glover, he focuses on marital relations. He's a psychotherapist as well, just like yourself, Wes.
Yes, I appreciate you mentioning him. I have recommended that book to several guys, especially with the concept of people pleasing. I work with a lot of guys who struggle to set boundaries, share what they want, express their convictions, stand up for themselves. And they tend to be in these relationship dynamics where the woman, not every time, but oftentimes, is more opinionated, more assertive, more demanding. And instead of negotiating and having an equal sparring partner, they often back down and back away. And so the work that we do is a lot of this book, which I'm sure you can speak more to than I can, having me only read the summary. But in short, it's just saying, hey, no one wants to be dominated and controlled. We're not trying to perpetuate this patriarchal narrative that has happened throughout the centuries, but there is a sense of innate assertiveness and conviction and directness and confidence that you need to step into as an individual, as a male, to take your place in the world and in the relationship. The cake analogy especially resonates because that's another thing where many of us become codependent on a relationship instead of interdependent. And I always say that codependency is one party needing the other, but that other party not needing that first party. But the interdependency is a reciprocal neediness, in a sense, to be able to rely on each other in an effective manner that otherwise you wouldn't. And I'm wondering for you, being someone that previously looked for a relationship to fulfill you in that meaning, how did you start to build your own meaning and identity and purpose outside of a relationship? How did you bake your cake to be ready
Mhm.
to put the icing on top?
Yeah. So about 2 years ago, I got out of my most recent relationship, and that became a big focus for me. And it started. It was very simple. It's like what are the things I'm interested in? So golf was one of them. I always had an interest in stand up comedy, and so I started to write some bits to do, and started getting involved in the stand up scene here in Salt Lake City. I gave a couple different, I did a couple different sets, went to some open mic nights, and had a great time with that. Also ended up doing some improv comedy, which was way more challenging for me. Being able to write, and practice beforehand, it's definitely a lot easier than for me at least than improv. So, and also with golf, I started taking that a lot more seriously, entering tournaments, practicing a lot more. And neither of those things are like what I would call my purpose in life or my calling. You have to start somewhere, right? And so pursuing those things, the way I thought about it too is like taking these things at like a 6 month time frame. Like if I really invest in something for 6 months at that, and even potentially before 6 months is over, I can figure out whether or not this is something I want to pursue in earnest. And I still like both of those things, but as I continue to pursue hobbies and interests, writing is really what has stood out for me as I feel called to do that. And for the last 9 months or so, I've been writing almost every day. So yeah, anyways, to summarize, I think you just have to start by following your interests. And I think for me, it eventually led me to the right place.
Yeah, I agree. I think there can be this pressure that guys put on themselves. Well, I got to figure myself out. I have to find this deep meaning. But I like your very simple, approachable framework, which is, well, just start with liking something just for you, something that you can explore, you can get better at. That's not work related. How many of us just say, oh, yeah, I have all these goals at work. I want to get better at this, this, and this. And that's good. You need to continue to improve in your day job, but having other jobs and duties really important. And I imagine for dating, it's really important too. I remember when I was dating my wife, it was the fact that I had these independent interests like music, and I was into fashion. I loved hiking and doing all these things where I could let her know, hey, I'm an individual person that isn't just this boring cake batter, that's just this unformed substance moving in the world passively, but I'm this concrete, substantive person that has ideas and thoughts and perspectives and interests that just lie true to me because that's who I am. And I think it's also a reflection of self-awareness. When you have interest, it shows who you are and who you're not, and you're not just focusing on pop culture or social media, all these things. It gives you some individuation to bring to the table for dating. So yeah, that's a really good point. I appreciate you sharing all that. And you mentioned the writing. Let's go ahead and dive into that. I am curious. We both write. We follow each other on our Substacks, which I'm excited for people to check yours out. We in our conversations previously have talked about how writing is this vulnerable expression of who you are. I mean, no matter what it's about, once you write about something that's related to your life, it's out there and those words are there. I'm curious how, for you, putting your experiences on paper or screen, in this case, have
Mhm.
contributed to your own journey and connecting with other men.
I think one of the things that helped me to start to uncover some of these passions I was interested in is learning how to be more vulnerable, because there are things that prevented me from taking action in, imposter syndrome for golf and for stand-up comedy, for example. And so being in this men's group and learning that being vulnerable is actually like a masculine trait, to like be able to share deep things with other men and be okay with yourself after sharing those things, and being accepted for having something wrong with you, I guess, or having made mistakes in the past, was massive for me to kind of move through the shame that I had in my life. I guess everyone has some, but like I've uncovered a lot of that, and released a lot of the toxic shame in my life
Mm.
by doing that with other men. I've now grown comfortable enough with myself to put this online, which one of my friends recently, he read one of my more recent essays, and he's like, dude, you talk about stuff online that I don't even talk about with my best friends. So I know it's unique, and for me, I don't know what it is. Maybe just by having done it so long in the men's group, it's kind of easy for me at this point.
I've experienced the same thing when I write. Of course, when you first start to do it, there's all these fears and anxieties in your head of like, what are people going to think? Am I going to sound dumb? Am I going to sound prideful? Am I going to sound confusing? Whatever it is. But just setting the stage and going for it is admirable. And that's what I found as well, that many guys similar to your buddy who made that comment, they might not be at the place where they're willing to do it, but there's this respect that you are. And I think that plants a seed in a lot of guys to start to think, well, why is that weird for me? And why would I not be able to do that? Because Harrison's a guy just like me, he's not floating on this cloud or got some special superpower. And I think it's really important that average Joes like you and I do write, because it speaks to the average male experience. When you go on YouTube and follow these manfluencers, as I read recently, or Substack publications that are more articulate and have thousands of followers, it can feel disconnected. Like, I can't relate to that person because they're way farther along. And for me, as I've written, I've resonated most with those people that are either pacing where I'm at or just 1 to 2 steps behind, looking for some guidance. And that has felt so connected and real, and that it just has felt very embodied. You mentioned earlier being in conversations with guys and that normalizing it and helping you make sense of things. I think writing is the same way. When you write something, it helps you make more sense of the experience and understanding of it. And I've been thinking about this a lot, how there was a day and age where many men were more creative. I mean, we look at people like Michelangelo, Pablo Picasso, these people that spent their whole lives creating, Ernest Hemingway. They were manly men. They could lift the weights and the pen. And I think that hybrid approach of guys being more creative hopefully is coming back, and it's really cool to see you lead the way on that. So thanks for sharing that experience in your writing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So speaking of vulnerability, I was reading a stat the other day that's pretty eye-opening, that 50% of men ages 18 to 24, so the key age for dating and singleness, have never asked someone out in person. I'm
Mm,
curious what your take is on that and how you coach men to approach women authentically in those real life settings.
yeah. Great question. Great stat also. A devastating stat. I think the reason that that stat exists today, or is so high today, is because of two reasons. One, I think the internet makes it so easy to meet people that it almost like incentivizes laziness. If you can meet, you could meet 5 women in a day on a dating app, right? Or if you're if you're really prolific with your swiping, you can meet hundreds of women a day. But going out in person, you have to put some effort in, right? And so I think that's part of it. And then the other aspect is there is also just like, I think this understanding that going out, and I don't want to say like the Me Too movement caused this, but I think there's like this concern that going out and talking to women makes you creepy, or it could, you could be offending these women by approaching them and basically expressing your interest in them. And it's much easier to hide behind a screen and show your interest that way instead.
Yeah, I've seen these videos surfacing of a guy asking a girl out in public and her filming it and then shaming him for doing that. I don't know if it's called some
Mm.
particular trend, but it is interesting why it is creepy to do that. I'm curious, do you have any takes on why women think that way or that language is used towards guys?
You know, it's crazy. I've been approaching women in public on and off for like 5 or 6 years now, and I've never once had a bad experience. I've never once had a woman like become angry, or even there's a few times that I've noticed a sense of uncomfortability, but never like get away from me or like you're gross or anything, or recording it and shaming me. So I think those are just one-off things that have blown up. I find that recently, at least, women see it as a bold action, and they appreciate it and respect it and feel appreciated. They're like, this man is taking a risk by in public putting himself out there and expressing his interest in me. So yeah, would definitely encourage more of it to be happening. I think women appreciate it just as much as men do.
Yeah, thanks for clearing the air on that. I'm glad that those videos certainly were one off and that again, boots on the ground perspective is that women are not just open and receptive to the ask in whatever capacity, even if they end up saying no, at least engaging with you, but more so that there's a level of respect. I think that a lot of guys need to hear that. Many of us write ourselves off before we even give ourselves a chance. Well, it's never going to work. How do I know what to say? I'm just going to get nervous and freeze up. She's going to think I'm dumb, or why even try? Because again, there's the convenience of the dating app. And it's very similar to people engaging physically in person versus, turning to pornography. It's this seeking of this alternative universe where you can control, you can be involved, and you can write the script without there being a participation. And I forget who it was. He wrote this book called The Shack. And he said, porn is like bad theology or ideology. It gives the perception of a relationship without the actual connection of one. And I think that speaks to how a lot of guys are going about dating, which is when someone is just a profile to swipe through and only a few words, and really, let's be honest, for us visually, someone's picture, that we chalk up who they are to that. And it's just yes or no, yes or no. And we so easily make a decision, then I think it desensitizes us to the process. And when you ask someone out in person, I think it does a couple things. The first thing is it really makes you ask yourself, is this worth it to me? Because I'm taking a risk from an energy perspective, from an emotional perspective, from a time perspective, and it helps you filter out the importance of if this person is worth asking out instead of just the convenience to the swipe. But I think the second thing it does is it confronts your confidence within yourself to say, do I believe in who I am enough to ask someone out? Do I feel worthy enough to be seen by someone and to feel good enough to ask for someone else's time in hopes that they'd spend it with me? And I'm curious if you battled any of that, and what your reflection and self-awareness process was like that in your journey of asking people out. For instance, be curious to know some of the mindsets you started with all those years ago before you started asking someone out to maybe today, what you would think or say to yourself in regards to the process.
Before I answer, I just wanted to add one other thing too. Like, you're talking about like, am I, when you take that risk of approaching, am I worthy enough of this person's time? I think there's another question, which is, am I going to be okay if this person tells me no? Is that going to change me fundamentally as a human? And I think that was my original mindset of like the outcome of like if I got the woman's number or not, or like if she agreed to go on a date with me, dictated my self worth, and that created a ton of anxiety because I felt like I was putting my self worth out into her hands, whoever this woman is that I'm approaching, right? And she can crush it or she can build it up. So yeah, it created a lot of anxiety. There was also like this sense of bothering that I was bothering this person. Even if it was like a 1 minute conversation, it's like, oh, I just wasted their time. if
Mm.
they say no to me or if they don't want to go out. And now my mindset is more like, first of all, I think that I can add value to somebody's life. Like, if they're stressed out or busy, that becomes obvious pretty quickly. And I'm like, hey, like, it was nice chatting with you. I'll let you get back to whatever it is. If they're not though, if they're like somewhat receptive to my introduction, I find that as an opportunity just to learn something about the person. Not so much, I'm not so focused on getting their number or like getting them to go on a date with me. Because I've also learned through time that there really aren't, there are a lot of potential matches out there for me, but not very many of them are great matches. And to expect someone just because of the way they look to be a great potential partner for me is doing me an injustice and also doing them an injustice. So I guess I've changed my outcome or my goal, I suppose, with these interactions to learn one or two things about the person instead of trying to get their phone number. Yeah, that's been the biggest mind shift for me, and it's made it a lot simpler and less anxiety filled to go and do this thing.
Yeah, it's almost taking back the power that you give someone. And your reframe is so helpful, which is this is 1 minute of someone's time. Am I really wasting it? I mean, they've probably spent at least 10 times that on social media in the last hour. It's not wasting it. But underneath that is a narrative that you're speaking to of a confidence to know that you're worth taking a space in the world. And if you don't have that in a 2 minute interaction, what makes you think you would have that in a long term relationship, in a job, in a community? Like everything starts with that one moment and that belief, but it has a integrated ripple effect for how you see yourself. And it seems like that has happened to you in those other areas. And when you started believing more in yourself and your worthiness was not contingent on the rejection or acceptance of a woman, you had more hobbies. You spent more time doing things outside of needing that date or not. You learned to be content with yourself. You got more confident. I imagine it affected your job positively too, where you weren't putting so much pressure on these outcome based scenarios defining who you are. And I think that is the journey of maturity for a guy to say, I can just be enough. I do have a job. Hopefully, I will be in a relationship, but how those things look aren't a final value judgment on who I am. But yet, how many of us guys interact with each other based on that? Well, how attractive is the girl you're dating? Or how many people have you slept with? Or how much money do you make in your job? Or how much weight can you lift? And it's all these external values that really, at the end of the day, could never fully encapsulate and define who you are. So I appreciate you sharing that. And it seems like when you can take those experiences that you have and share them with other guys, it really makes a difference and it normalizes things. I'm wondering, men's group are something that you are passionate about. What makes an effective men's group work? What approaches maybe don't work? And how can guys who are interested find one if it's right for them?
Integratedmen.net is the website. It's not my group. I'm a leader of a small group. So I guess I'm an ambassador at this point for it. But I think it's been cultivated over 10 years. I think there's 50 members in it now. But comparing this experience to my previous men's group I was a part of, I would say, well, first of all, it's cheaper, and I think that, I guess, the money is like two. There's two sides to the money. So like, I think you need to require some level of investment for people to be willing to show up and put time into it. But at the same time, if it's too expensive, you're going to have a lot more turnover. And that's what I experienced with Neil's group, is a lot of turnover. So you develop connections with people, you start to feel comfortable being vulnerable with them. You trust them to share your deepest darkest secrets, and then they leave, and then you have to recreate this connection. Whereas the group I'm in now, a lot of the guys have been in the group for multiple years, and those are the people who, like, as a facilitator of one of the small groups, those are the best check-ins. Those are the ones, when guys, what happens is each week guys show up and share for 15 minutes about what's going on in their lives. But those are the most vibrant and lively conversations, because those are the people I know the best, And those are the people that have the most confidence in their ability to be vulnerable. So it's kind of like a reciprocal effect. And anyways, a men's group that cultivates this level of trust and the ability to be vulnerable, I think, is the number one trait that you should be looking for if you're trying to find a men's group. And I feel that Integrated Men has achieved that up until this point.
You bring up a good point. So many of our relationships are either so transactional and so temporary. And it seems like this men's group addresses both of those, which is it allows time for things to be shared at a safe pace because you have the commitment of the long-term timeline in a group, and also with the transactional bit within that allows you time each week to not only build that trust but then to take up that trust or use that trust by being vulnerable and not just doing a quick hit, sharing what you need to or want to, hearing what you need and want to, and then being able to dip. There's a real level of commitment. And that is something in general, I think we've lost as a culture is the value of loyalty and what it really costs someone to share, and how important it is to honor that cost of you hearing someone else's story and you sharing how much you're worth someone else paying that cost to hear it and committing to growing together. That's very encouraging to hear. That's that first foundational level. And then I'm curious if there's been any facets that you feel like haven't worked or things that guys should avoid that aren't as helpful.
One other thing that comes to mind is consistency. So the men's group I'm a part of now meets weekly, and I think the consistent interaction with the other guys in the group, continuing to show up for one another, is really important and valuable. And maybe that was that. I would say that's something I didn't get from Neil Strauss's group. It was we met monthly, and it just felt like a lot could happen in that time frame. And if you're looking for other people to hold you accountable and to start to gain trust in others, it's not enough interaction. So, um, yeah, I would say that's something to look out for.
Yeah, and I have found that in my therapy practice as well. If someone can't meet weekly, even biweekly is on the edge, but certainly the people I meet with monthly, it feels difficult to develop a traction and some consistency enough to have that trust and rapport. It feels like a catch up more at that point instead of a weekly touch point that feels like you're really integrating into someone's lives. Important enough to me to the point where I have a 3 month minimum of meeting weekly because it's so important to establish that foundation just on the basis of getting to know someone, how they share, how they don't share, their nonverbal cues, the way that they share things, getting into their past. And if it's in a group, it's obviously limited sharing. It takes a lot of time to build rapport. And then that last level of it being men, so it takes even longer to do that. But I imagine once you lock in and once you get in that groove of sharing and that active listening, that people are really committed and do feel like they're showing up in a way that feels helpful and loyal. So that's awesome. And I'm curious for you, I think men's groups are newer as far as us talking culturally about a space for just men to have. So for guys who have either never heard of men's groups or have rarely heard of them, and it piques their interest enough to say, what's this about? Should they start with the integrated life, or what's a good first few steps to exploring finding and trying out some men's group? And maybe within that, what's some helpful criteria that a guy should look for? It sounds like cost is important, open or close group, timeline, yeah, and any other things that may be helpful for a guy trying to check one out.
Someone reached out to me recently. I mentioned this online somewhere, and someone was like, "Hey, man, I'm interested in the community you were talking about." And I told them, "Yeah, like we'd love to have you. We'd love to. Frankly, like there's an interview process to get in." And I told him it costs money too, and he was like, "Oh, I'm not trying to spend money. I'm just looking for community." And I understand, like if you are just looking for people to like talk to, that maybe you shouldn't have to pay for that. But if you're looking for a community of like-minded people who are trying to grow themselves and in a and frankly like Integrated Men, I would say, is curated because of the interview process. There's a level of time and investment that that it takes to build a community like that. So I guess I would, the criteria that I would base it off of our longevity, like how long has the group been around for? I would ask about interviewing or like being able to speak to other members in the group to hear about their experience before joining. And then also, this isn't really a criteria, but like if you're looking into joining something like that, I would make yourself commit to at least 3 months, like you said, probably even longer, like 6 months, and commit to showing up every week. And hopefully the group meets every week, frankly. I found a lot of value in that. But anyways, what I was saying is like you, because for me, the first few meetings that I joined of integrated men, I was like, oh, these guys are like, I don't know, they're being very vulnerable, like being all, mushy, and I don't really need this in my life or whatever. And now it's like one of the things I'm most excited about in my life. So but I just continued to show up week after week and started to get value maybe, 4 or 5 or 6 weeks in. So whoever is thinking about it that's listening, make yourself go for at least a couple of months. Keep showing up for yourself.
That's a powerful testimony. I relate to that. Of course, it's been a while since I haven't been mushy considering my my work that I do as a therapist, but yeah, that many of us start with a feeling of awkwardness and closed offness to being vulnerable. And this is something a lot of our culture has gotten wrong of trying to make men open up, is that men open up different than women do, and certainly at a different pace. And it's important to know it's primarily on showing up and being open to that. And as you show up and as you, in a small staged or developmental manner, start to open up,
Yeah.
it'll become more normal because you're hearing every week guys share and get real. And you get a little more comfortable with hearing a little bit more intense or real things. And then you get to the point where you find that within yourself, I imagine, and you start sharing bit by bit things that are more important to you. And then it sounds like for you, it's just normal now. And not only is it normal, but now it has become a primary staple in your week. I think that testimony is much needed to hear, that every guy can go on that journey of not being forced to open up or make something happen, but to, take their time, but to make sure that they're committed in the process. And I like your pushback to your friend who said he just wants community. It's similar with dating, right? People just want a relationship, but they feel like they don't have to try. And I think the things that mean the most to us in this world, getting a job, having community, getting into a long-term partnership. Naval
Ravikant, Ravikant, I think.
Ravikant says this, where if you're making a big life decision that's going to affect you long term, why would you not spend up to a year considering that? I mean, the fact that you
Mm.
only spend a month contemplating a decision that might affect 5 years of your life, like take the time to do it. And I think this men's group is the same. Take the time, take the money, take the investment to actually do it, because we're talking about long-term community that is a staple, integral part of functioning as a human. And the fact that most guys have 0 to 1 close friends, the least you can do is pay a little money to start, getting involved. So I appreciate you sharing all that and leaving us with that testimony. So before we close, I'm curious, where can people find your work and what you're up to?
Thanks for the conversation, Wes. I write at the subtleshift.substack.com. Most of my writing is talking about life lessons that I've learned. Hopefully when you read it, you'll see ways that you can incorporate mistakes I've made, and then also the lessons I've learned as a result of that into your own lives. And something I'm doing, just started doing, is branching out from the small group that I coach now into one-on-one coaching. And I think what I'm most passionate about is some of this dating and approaching women, that topic that we covered already. I think dating apps are dehumanizing to some extent. I think it's created some bad mentalities and like experiences when it comes to dating, and I want to help change that. For single men who are interested in improving their dating lives, please reach out to me on Substack. I'm starting to work with people like yourselves.
That's good to hear. We need your work in the world, and we're thankful. Guys, if you're listening out there and you're wondering, how do I date? Is it worth it? Go grab a time slot with this guy, because it could potentially be the difference in dying alone and finding your life partner, which is big stuff. So, thank you again, Harrison, for your time in our conversation. And until next time, guys.
Thanks, Wes.